Hi, my name is Jennifer Webb McCrae, and if you live in Cumberland County, I am your Cumberland County prosecutor. Today we're doing another episode of Coping with COVID. Today we're going to be talking about addressing behaviors that are abusive during a pandemic. I have here with me today my trusty special agent, Matt Rudd. He is sort of a producer of this show, but he also helps me with special programming and strategic planning at our office. I'm really lucky today to have Samantha from SERV with us today. SERV is our domestic violence organization in Cumberland County. And if you are a victim of domestic violence, they have a lot of great programs that help people get out of cycles of domestic violence. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam for a second to let her tell you about what she does at SERV and what SERV is doing during the pandemic. And we'll talk about that throughout the show. Welcome, Sam.
Hi, thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I work, as the prosecutor said, for Services Empowering Rights of Victims. I am the Domestic Violence Response Team Coordinator for the county, and I also work with all of our volunteers that go out 24/7 to support survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence. A little bit more background about me is that I grew up in Cumberland County. I live over near Bridgeton, and I went to school over in Vineland. And when I went to college, I decided to come back here because I love this county so much. It's such a great county with so many strengths, and I love being a part of it. So thank you for having me here.
So this series is focused on talking about services within the county that are continuing during this public health crisis that we're all going through and experiencing together. And my first question for you is, what services does SERV provide, and how have you adapted that during the pandemic?
All right. So we have a lot of services. I would say the crux of our service is the hotline. So our hotline number is 1-800-225-0196, and that's a 24/7 hotline that is there to connect you with resources, provide you with options, or if a survivor just wants to talk to someone about what's going on, just vent about life. And it is also a resource to people who care about survivors who are trying to figure out ways to better support them. So that's the first thing that we provide. We also have an online chat feature, which has gotten a lot more traffic since the pandemic started. Because what we're noticing is that because people aren't going out to their jobs, aren't going to school, aren't going out to the store, any regular place that they would go, they're not getting that break from being at home with their abusive partners, which is a really scary time for some people. And in that scenario, how are you going to call a hotline when the person you're calling the hotline about is in the other room? So I really want to highlight the online chat feature that people can use. It's through our website, centerffs.org/serv. And at the bottom, there's a little feature that says, talk to us. And you can click that, and there's going to be an advocate that will get back to you. The other resources that we still provide are all of our counseling services. Now, they've changed a little bit. Instead of having our counseling in person, we're doing virtual counseling like this, that we're connecting with people through the interwebs, through secure servers that meet all sorts of HIPAA compliance requirements, as well as doing calls over the phone if survivors prefer that to this video setting. We also still are offering safe housing. Now, in the safe house, we have a lot of social distancing protocol in place to help people stay safe. The safe house is for survivors of intimate partner violence, domestic violence, human trafficking that are in fear of their lives. So if you need that resource, once again, our hotline number is where to go to. And we also do support groups as well, which keep an eye out on those on either our website or our Facebook page. And once again, you can call the hotline to sign up for them. We do education and prevention in the community, where we We'll go to schools, we will go to your organizations and talk about what do healthy relationships look like. We meet the needs of the audience. If you want to hear more about human trafficking and what that looks like, what are the red flags, because it's here in Cumberland, then we will also do a training on that. And then, of course, our crisis services, which is my wheelhouse, that involves going out to police departments, hospitals, the courts to be able to support people who are in immediate crisis. And we also have court advocates that are pretty good friends with the victim witness group over at the prosecutor's office to support survivors at the courthouse, because it can be overwhelming if you've never experienced it before.
Right. Okay. So just a couple things like I think we need to highlight here. As we move into our homes to social distance and be safe from the pandemic, sometimes we're finding if homes have dysfunction, if homes have trauma, we have to be extra vigilant to deal with and address some of the existing social issues that we have all the time, like domestic violence, like emotional violence, like child abuse. So you've heard us talk about some of those things on this series before, but I encourage everyone, grandparents, neighbors, friends, siblings, to check up on your loved ones in ways that are different than knocking on the door and, giving hugs. Use Facebook Messenger. I talk to my mom about once every other day, just so I can eyeball my dad by using the video feature in Facebook Messenger. But there are lots of different things out there. Free Zoom accounts. Have to be careful because there's been hacking, but other ways where we can make sure that we eyeball the people we love and look, not pry, but look for signals of distress and things like that. What you mentioned a lot, there was a lot packed in the services that you do, but we've worked together on things like presenting healthy relationships to our kids. And I so appreciate the fact that you've been able to do that by making it age appropriate. What does a healthy relationship look like for a teen? That's different than what a healthy relationship would look like for a middle schooler, maybe. And I want the public to know that that's a valuable service that's out there, that we can train our kids up right so that they understand that they have a right to autonomy, meaning a space of their body, that they have a right to be treated with respect from a potential partner and things of that nature. So we thank you for that service, and we thank you for helping us present that to our young people. And I'm always looking for more ways to work with SERV as well as you, Sam, because you're just so wonderful in what you do. So thank you for that.
You're wonderful too. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So one thing that I am concerned about is that I, have become more educated to the fact that every partner who is subjected to either sexual violence or domestic violence needs to have a safety plan. And what does that look like during a time of social distancing? I mean, how would you cope with it if someone was not ready to leave yet, but was concerned about their safety or their emotional well-being? What does a safety plan look like in a pandemic?
Oh, it's a really good question. So we safety plan for if there's a fire. We make plans for how to safely get away. And the same goes for when when you're living with someone who is like a fire to you, that's damaging, that when you're near them, negative things start to come up. And because we all deserve to be treated with love and kindness and respect. So some of the things that we talk about in safety planning is, and every person's safety plan is different, and definitely the hotline can help tweak yours to fit your needs best. In general, though, you can use different technology to support you in your safety plan. So there's an app called Circle of Six that is free that survivors can sign up for, and you can have 1 to 6 people connected through that app that you can, with the press of a button, send out a message to them. And those messages vary. It can be as simple as maybe you just need a break from the tension that is being created. Maybe there's an argument brewing up and you need a distraction to stop the argument because all of your strategies to try to shut down the escalation are not working. Then you can press a button on this app that just sends out a message to that circle of support that says, hey, please call me right now. And that phone ringing can help stop that cycle. Other features in it include saying, can you please call the police? You can press a button that shares your location ongoing with that circle of 6. So if you have access to technology, that's a great option. There's a lot of other apps too that do a similar thing. If you are not as tech savvy, then you can also, as you were saying, have a code word with people that you care about over the phone. So you can call a loved one and just say something like, the paint isn't drying fast enough, and have that phrase that just lets them know, I need support. You could also pretend that you're calling a pizza place and say that, hi, can we please order a cheese pizza? How long will it be? And you can have that coded conversation that the person who's standing in the room with you, who is the one who is triggering the safety plan, will not necessarily recognize that you're calling to get extra support.
I've seen that one with calling. They've played that fairly frequently with calling dispatch. So you're calling 911, but you're saying, I like a pizza. And then, the dispatchers are trained to know that's a weird call. And they ask, do you need help? And then you give them the address. So I actually like that.
Yeah. And I love, too, that the dispatchers are trained to use yes or no questions, too. Mm-hmm. So to keep it simple that, yes, I do you need support? Yes, I do. It could say, do you want extra pepperoni? Yes, I do. So that's a good safety planning strategy, as well as having a plan for if you do need to leave. How is that going to happen? Do you have a go bag ready? Where can that go bag be hidden? If you are leaving, where are you going to go? You can call the hotline if you're in fear of your life, and we may be able to connect you with safe housing. No guarantees there, because there's all sorts of things that have to be met for that situation. But is there another place that you could go? Is there another resource that you could be connected with that could support you in the interim to get out of that household? Because if you are in fear of your life and in danger, then you can't stay there. And we're happy to support you in all the options that exist to leave. And
Sam, I want to interrupt you for a minute, because I think it's important to let the public know that although the courthouse is closed, the administration of justice continues. So if a person is in need of a temporary restraining order, obviously you would have to get a hold of the police at some point, but we are still able to connect with either a municipal court judge, in some cases a superior court judge, to get the issuance of temporary restraining orders. So I don't want anyone to suffer in silence thinking, oh, the court is closed, there's no way for me to get a restraining order, because that is not the case. We are able to, we do that telephonically in normal times, and because we've become so good at that, we're able to do that even during the pandemic. So no one should suffer in silence. No one should think that the courts are closed, so there's no help for them. First responders, police officers, sheriff's officers, they are still working. They are still serving temporary restraining orders and final restraining orders. So please don't suffer in silence. You still can get that help from the court system.
And SERV court advocates are also still virtually present for different restraining order hearings as well. So
just so the public understands, let me finish this point, Matt, and then I want you to jump in. Just so the public understands that when someone gets a temporary restraining order, they have to then go to court. And we have advocates that participate in that process, and we also have domestic violence advocates from SERV that participate prior to that part where you go to court. And that's to support victims of domestic violence. We know that there's a cycle of domestic violence. And I'm going to ask Sam to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But we also live in a judgment-free zone. We know that sometimes it takes more than one time to realize that I'm really in danger. My children are really in danger. So no one's going to judge you if you've had a temporary restraining order before. We're going to have advocates that are going to help you. They're going to explain what you're going through and the cycle of domestic violence. And we're here to help you. And we can even do that during this pandemic because we have all these wonderful communication tools like the telephone, like Zoom, which we're on right now, like conference calling. So please understand that no one has to suffer in silence. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Matt.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring it back to that element of developing a safety plan. And I know Sam and I have talked before about this dynamic where oftentimes people that are in most need of developing something like a safety plan might not even realize that they need it or should have thought that through, which then kind of puts, the kind of people who are watching this episode, puts them in the position of advocating or being that surrogate for somebody, of thinking through and checking in with the people that you're concerned about and helping them gain the awareness and even gain some of the knowledge of the resources. So some of the goal of this episode is to share that you can be that person's safety plan to a degree, right? You can help someone think through where should they go, or realizing that they're worthy of love and not see abuse as something that is commonplace or normal or should be tolerated. So I think that's another component. I know Sam and I have talked about that before, of when the awareness isn't even present, stand in the gap for somebody and help them realize that.
Right. And I want everyone to know that once we air this presentation, I will make sure that all of the resources that Sam talked about and that I talk about are in the comments. So you can just go to the comments and click a link and be able to research some of the things that we're talking about today. So Sam, talk a little bit about the cycle of domestic violence. So maybe the person who doesn't understand what that is at this point might understand that there's like a time of stress, the act, and then a cooling off period, a honeymoon period, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So domestic violence is a pattern inherently. It's not a one-time event that never happens again, because the process of domestic violence creates that sensation of needing to walk on eggshells. Things start off wonderful. There's a honeymoon phase. The abusive partner starts off super charming. There may be a few red flags here or there, but it's something that easily gets brushed off that, oh, that's just normal. That's okay. And then as the relationship starts to develop, and that could be over a few days, a few weeks, a few years, it depends on everybody's individual relationship, tension starts to escalate. Like there starts to be small things that start popping up. And then that tension leads to an explosion of violence. And that's typically when there's a crime committed. And then after that explosion happens and the survivor starts thinking about, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did this, or even questioning if they want to still be in the relationship, the abusive partner comes back with, I love you so much. I'm so sorry. I never meant for that to happen that way. If only you hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have reacted that way. And then there's forgiveness. And because there's hope that it won't happen again. And then the honeymoon phase starts again. And then the tension starts to escalate again. And we see that pattern ramps up over time. For some partners, it takes a year to complete a whole cycle. For others, it could be a day that they wake up in the honeymoon phase, tension starts to build while the partners are at work. Maybe someone didn't respond to a text fast enough and the other partner's wondering what's going on. Why aren't they responding to me? They must be doing something else, or they don't care about me enough. And then by the time they get home from work, there's an explosion of violence. And before they go to bed, there's that apology that builds hope. And then they wake up in the honeymoon phase again. What we know is that as those cycles continue, the explosions of violence escalate. Meaning that it could start with a shove or a push and lead to a punch. and then lead to non-fatal strangulation, which has a very high fatality rate. And then could possibly, if there's weapons in the home, lead to those weapons being used. So when you start noticing that you're in these cycles of violence, there's a very high probability that the violence will escalate.
So some of the things that when I hear you talk that I get concerned about during what we're all experiencing together now is that we know that people aren't working. So there's financial stressors. We know that people aren't leaving the house. So there's those emotional stressors that you can get away from that might dissipate that stress that we're not able to do right now. So it kind of gives me empathy for the person that's going through this because, we always want to think of our home as our sanctuary. And for some people, victims of spouses who are victims of domestic violence, children who are victims of child abuse. And I don't want to discount emotional abuse because I think that is sometimes the scars from that are worse than the physical scars, are things that we all need to be concerned about. And we need to be empathetic and understand the science of the cycle of violence. I grew up in a culture where I remember my grandmom saying, the first time, shame on me. The second time, shame on you. So and what that meant was like, if I helped you and said, girl, I'm gonna help you get out of this situation, and then you run right back to it, I'm not gonna help you again because the next time, shame on you. I was there to help you and you didn't take my help, and now you're back with that same guy. So I'm not gonna help you again. But if you understand that there's a science to this, that there's a cycle to this, and then you also understand that there are a lot of what could be considered legitimate reasons to stay. My kids are going to be more financially set if I stay. We're going to be homeless if I leave. It kind of puts you in a position where you can have empathy for people and understand why they endure things that no one should have to ever endure. So I knew that, I think, before I became prosecutor, but just seeing it more regularly has made me incredibly empathetic to the position that we find some of our victims in.
Yeah. And I just want to say, going off of that directly, that it is never the survivor's fault. No one asks to be treated this way.
Yes. And, one thing we haven't touched on too much, but last month, I believe, was Sexual Assault Survivors Month.
Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Yep.
Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And we usually have a lot of activities, but because of dealing with the pandemic, it was hard to be fully engaged. We put some stuff up on Facebook, but we're going to have to circle back because that's a huge issue. And, there was a time where you couldn't even rape of a spouse was not even considered a crime. So we've come a long way because it is a crime when someone doesn't consent. And that can even happen in a marriage. And that is one of the forms of abuse that people experience if domestic violence goes on in a home. I'm not saying it happens in every case. I'm saying that it's one form. So let's talk a little bit about sexual assault, because I know SERV works with that, and what's going on with that as we move through this pandemic.
Yes. So we are still supporting survivors of sexual assault. If they call our hotline, and it could be assaults that happened recently, assaults that happened in childhood, assaults that happened in adulthood 15 years ago. Doesn't matter how long it's been. In the state of New Jersey, there is no statute of limitations anymore, civilly or criminally, so that's pretty exciting. So we will support survivors wherever they're at, and it is very common for survivors to take a decade to feel ready to talk to someone about that. And we understand that. We are never going to turn to someone and say, oh, well, why didn't you talk about it sooner? Because that's not how the brain works. So at SERV, we still have our hotline and we still have our counselors. Additionally, though, if it is an assault that happened recently, then we are available to support with the Sexual Assault Response Team, which is a coordinated response in the county, including the medical personnel at the hospital, the sexual assault nurse examiner, and sometimes law enforcement. Now, each of those members, and of course the advocates, each of those members is optional to the survivor, but they're there to make sure that all of that survivor's bases are covered if they're interested in going down that path. And we are still providing sexual assault forensic exams in this county and throughout the state, actually, to survivors at their hospitals. In Cumberland, Vineland and Spear and Bridgeton and Spear both offer sexual assault forensic exams.
So I want to share with everyone that the part of that sexual assault team are our advocates, as well as our sexual assault nurse examiners. And they are still operational during this time period. And if you are a recent victim of sexual assault and you report that to the police or you present to the hospital, we have sexual assault nurse examiners, we call them stain nurses, that will come out. They're professionally trained. They have degrees in nursing, but they're also trained specifically in the forensic nursing discipline to take the evidence that we often and welcome having when we're prosecuting these cases, and will help you. And our goal is always not to re-victimize a victim. So it's so encouraging to know that we have the connection with SERV, and that, you know, a victim advocate will be at your disposal if you request one, and also a sexual assault response team advocate can be at your disposal as well for follow-up. So what we're experiencing right now, and I think this is not just in this realm, I think it's across the board, is people don't want to go to the hospitals. They're afraid that if they do, they're going to catch COVID. But I'm here to tell you that the hospitals are taking, you know, many safety precautions to make sure that that is not so. There are medically trained professionals there still able to do the sexual assault evaluation and obtain the evidence, and they will not put you in harm's way. So please know that, because we have seen a decline in the reporting of both domestic violence and sexual assault. That does not mean that it's not happening. That just means that, you know, people are afraid to go to the hospital. They're afraid to come out of their homes and go to the police department. And we want to give them ways to still be able to take action if they're in any type of danger or have experienced any type of violence. And that's part of why we're getting this word out to the public today.
And to minimize contact even more, the advocates are now providing the advocacy via the phone in the room that the exam is happening in the ER. So you don't have that extra person there who you don't know where they've been or who they're living with. It could potentially just be the survivor and the same nurse and other medical staff in the ER.
Yeah. So,
Sam, is there a connection? You know, you mentioned the non-fatal strangulation, which often then will become fatal as it progresses. Is there a connection with sexual violence that is also put somebody at danger at a higher level, or what's the urgency when we're talking about sexual violence in the realm of domestic violence?
So there can be a lot of risk associated to that. One is reproductive coercion. So there's many different ways that exist, and different strategies that perpetrators of domestic and sexual violence will use. So it could be forcing someone to be pregnant. There are some survivors of intimate partner violence who report being pregnant consistently for 7 to 10 years and have so many children. There are some survivors who, when they get pregnant, they're told, well, you can't have that child, and are forced to have an abortion against their will, which we're always about consent. So those are some starting risk factors when it comes to sexual assault within the home with domestic violence. There's also the emotional trauma that goes along with it. It specifically shows a willingness to cross a line when it comes to the type of violence, because sexual violence is one of the most personal, intimate forms of violence that one person can exert on another. And it's a myth that it's strangers who do it to people. It's a very low percentage of stranger sexual assaults that occur. Most of the time, it is a trusted person that the survivor knows. And the trust that is violated when that happens, the gaslighting that occurs, which gaslighting is making people question their own reality. Making a survivor feel like, am I crazy? Did I make this up? Or they really love me, so this must just be what love looks like. So it alters the reality. So that is also a danger of sexual violence within domestic violence, because it is that much more of a violation of someone's trust and intimacy.
So just circling back a little bit to the reproductive violence, I think most people can surmise why, but why someone would do that. If you have several small children and you're not able to work, then you're more dependent on the abuser, because he controls your finances and he controls your ability to have money. Also, for a survivor, they can make all those rationalizations in their head that, oh wow, if I leave, I don't have support, my children will be homeless. This isn't a great environment, but if I stay here, my kids have a roof over their head. These are real life decisions that people who are victims of domestic violence and sexual violence have to haggle with every day. And I say that just to hope that, that gives people more empathy for the situation that they're in. I know when we talk about we celebrate Domestic Violence Awareness Month, because I think that's a time to celebrate all the survivors who can tell the story and have the testimony of getting to the other side and not being a victim any longer, being a survivor. But I think it's, really important to talk about all of these cycles and the things that can, kind of happen, that people who you would not ever believe are victims of, domestic violence. It doesn't matter gender, race, socioeconomic level. And that's part of sometimes the shame, is that, oh, how could I be an accomplished person, a woman, a professional, and be experiencing this? That might be something that makes a person not want to come out. But we don't want to see people suffer in silence. We want to meet people where they are and walk on that journey with them at their pace. But we also want to make people aware of, we have the testimonies where we can talk about the people who die. I know that if a firearm is in the home, it increases the likelihood of real damaging violence to a person. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but it exponentially increases the danger. I think that's similar to that, when you called out sexual violence, because if you're willing to cross that line and make someone take something from someone without consent, it's not hard to get to that next step. And we just want people to have the awareness of that. And can you talk a little bit about the trauma that domestic violence and violence in general in a family exerts on the children of the family?
Okay, cool. So ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. So there's an inventory of 10 different very traumatic events that could be recurring, that occur to a child during the time even before they're born and the age of 18. Because even things that happen while a child is still in the womb of their mother, they can sense certain things. So if the mother is in a abusive relationship, the endorphins that start pounding through her body when the abuser comes in, and the adrenaline that starts pumping, that is something that the child feels. And the same goes for people that the mother really loves, then the child will know, oh, that voice, I can associate it to someone that I really like, that makes someone else happy. So this goes both ways. So domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual abuse are all on that inventory. And there are very real correlations that have been drawn that lead us to believe that the higher the ACE score, at least 4 or more, the more likely someone is going to die at an earlier age than the average, that they're more likely to have heart disease, that they're more likely to have depression and anxiety, that they're more likely to attempt suicide, they're more likely to misuse and abuse drugs and alcohol, that they're more likely to experience sexual violence at an older age as an adult as well. So abuse in the home, even if it's not directly exerted towards a child, still has an effect like that.
So just to expound upon that, and we actually have a brochure at our office about this, but I know that there are studies that show that children who experience domestic violence, they witness domestic violence in their home, they're more likely to be bullies if they take on the traits of the aggressor. They are more likely to be grow up and be part of the criminal justice system if they experience it over an extended period of time. And I don't have the statistics for this, but just think about it. How do we learn what relationships should look like? We tend to think back on what we experienced as children, what we witnessed between our parents or witnessed between the adults in our home. And you can see how a child, having witnessed that for a long time, could model the behavior, either in becoming the aggressor or becoming the victim, because they're modeling the behavior that they witnessed in a home. So there's all kinds of studies that prove out that if we as a society don't value and don't want to address domestic violence, that we all pay for it. Because when, working moms miss work because they have a black eye, that employers, they pay out sick time. And that's not the primary thing that, I want everybody to worry about, but it's everyone's issue. It's everyone's problem. And we need to get over that stigma of saying this is a family issue, because if we don't address it with our young kids now and with our victims and with our perpetrators, right, we're going to be paying for it, for years, when people, reproduce that cycle. So that's why it's important that everybody have a stake in changing models and making sure that people don't suffer in silence. And that's why I love working with you, Sam. And I love that we have partners in other disciplines that make this job easy. I want to share with everyone that we opened a child advocacy center. And that center is for child victims to never have to go into a police station or go into the prosecutor's office. When we interview them and when we prep them for trials, we're able to do all of that at our child advocacy center. And we have a partnership with SERV where we also are able to get those victims of child abuse, of sexual assault services right at our child advocacy center. And it's not a secret, and I'm going to speak it into existence. I'm looking for a grant so that we can hold support groups for teens, support groups for middle schoolers, and hopefully, I don't know how you do it with little kids. We're already doing play therapy at the Child Advocacy Center, but that we have support groups so that we don't have to let it get to the point that someone's, a victim of child abuse or sexual assault. If they're having trouble, if they've experienced trauma, we want support groups that they can go to and work through those issues with professionals. So SERV knows I'm looking for that. They would be a great partner, and I hope to be able to bring that programming to our residents in the very near future.
And I would also just point out too, our various coalitions, like our Positive Youth Development Coalition, which our office kind of runs some of the leads on that, and Sam is and her team are very involved with that. also are looking ahead to the impact of trauma, just like the CAC is doing those treatment services, trying to expand out and reduce the effects of trauma so that we're getting ahead of the curve, and some of the prevention things will stop those cycles of violence.
Yes. So Sam, before we close, talk a little bit about what you're doing with Positive Youth and the PALS, because I think that's important, because that's where we're working on the whole community before we have issues, right?
Absolutely. So I've been very honored to be able to be a part of supporting the police athletic leagues over the past 3 years or so. So going out during different practices and doing trainings for kids of all ages on what a healthy relationship looks like. So I've worked with kids who are in elementary school, and I've been working with kids who are in high school and everything in between. And I've been meeting with the PALs wherever they're at. So if it's basketball season, then I will go to the basketball court and we will have a interactive activity, because I feel like presentations aren't really great for, they can be very effective in learning, but when you want to get like 15 strong minutes in with people, you want to get them moving. So I've done activities using basketballs on the basketball court, flag football right on the field. So that has been a really amazing experience, because we have awesome kids in Cumberland County that are so motivated and have so much support through our coalitions and the police athletic leagues, because the officers who work in those leagues, they care so much. They are there for the kids in incredible ways that the kids can call them at any time. And I've seen them, even while I'm talking to the officers, making plans to train and talk to the kids about healthy relationships, they'll get a call from one of the kids who needs support with something. And it's beautiful that our community is able to do that. And if you are interested in joining one of the police athletic leagues, then I highly encourage you to do so. I think it'd be an incredibly rewarding experience. And if you know a child that you think would benefit from having that extra support in their life, yeah, please look into it and connect them.
So Sam is part of our coalition. She serves on the county work group that Matt and I chair. And Sam has gone out in the past 3 years doing life skills. So obviously, SERV is going to work on healthy relationships, healthy dating for our older kids. And if you don't think that's needed in our community, you are sadly mistaken, because a lot of the social things that our kids see, the video games, the messaging and music, promote hypermasculinity in men, and somewhat promotes hypersexuality in young girls. So, as a parent of a young adult at this point, it was something that I was always concerned about, making sure that, my kid had other messages on what healthy relationships look like. And Sam is out there in the community doing that with our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. And parents, don't worry, we make it very age appropriate. And we're talking about things like respect and how to, treat people with respect, which should be at the foundation of establishing relationships. So I thank you, Sam, for that. Before we close out, I just want you to mention again the 1-800 number and the resources that are out there that SERV provides.
Sure. So our hotline number in Cumberland is 1-800-225-0196. If it is not safe to call that number, then you can go to our website at centerffs.org/serv, SERV. And down at the bottom, there's going to be a little icon that you can click to message with one of our advocates. At the top of the page as well, there's a safe exit button. So if you're concerned about it showing up in your history that you've been to the page, you can click safe exit. It'll pop you over to a different website, and your history will not reflect that you were on the page.
Very, very good information. Very good information. So, Sam, I want to thank you today for being with us. Matt, I want to thank you for being with us too. This has been another episode of Coping with COVID, addressing abusive behaviors during a pandemic. We'll be back shortly with more programming on how to cope with this time of social distancing. I'm Jennifer Webb McCrae. Goodbye. Be safe and be well.
Bye, everyone.